and a light unto my path. I will not forget your love to me, and yet my heart is forever wandering. Lord Jesus, be my guide and hold me to your side, and I will love you to the end. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path.
Thanks, girls. So tonight we're blessed to have Bethany with us, speaking to us about the gift of silence. Right? The gift of silence? Nice. Yeah. So, without any further ado, we'll just pull it up. It seems like everyone's having exams and stuff, so. Oh, too cold. Yeah. Much.
The threat of life will get larger the further away.
Sorry, just technical difficulties. It's heavy. Do you want a table for like your laptop, or?
I didn't know.
Like I wouldn't do it that way.
I mean, how much can I see from the? Oh, that's very small.
Yeah, I'll grab the thing as well.
No, that's.
That's good. No, I'll grab the swords. Sure.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right.
Sorry.
No, all good.
I'm just slightly blind.
Nice. Yes. Oh, good.
I can see speaker notes. God bless your soul. Sometimes I can't see them. Thank you. Okay. You trying to tell me I'm not tall enough for that? Okay, fine. Hello. So the topic that I was given was the gift of silence, and when I received it, I was like, yes. I was like, yes, this is a great topic for me because I'm not silent most of the time, so I'll get to learn something hopefully very useful here. And then at the beginning of this week, God taught me a very important lesson because I got a cold, and it meant that whenever I spoke, I had like a 50-60% chance of going to a really hideous coughing fit, so I learned to be quiet very quickly. So I had to live this talk quite in an important way this week. So hopefully you'll get something out of it. Ah, yes, it works. Awesome. Okay. So I think I want to start off by kind of asking generally, does anyone here think that they have a problem with silence? I like a little bit of audience interaction, so if you think, okay, how about raise your hands if while you're doing any of the following activities, you have to listen to music or a podcast or something. If you're driving, okay, we've got some people there. If you're studying, yep, okay. If you're sleeping, I used to do that. If you're working, yep, okay, Lids, I'm liking this. You're walking or, yep, okay, going to the gym, okay. Eating, reading, there's a whole bunch more. But to me, this kind of attests to the fact that we don't really like doing things in quiet. We could do all of these activities in silence. But I've noticed that the more time goes on, I meet fewer and fewer people who are actually comfortable doing these things in total silence. With sleeping being one of the really important ones, because that's also a hard one to do when there's noise, but it's also hard to do it. I'll get back to that later. So why are we so resistant to things actually being quiet? And I think, my favorite person in the world is C.S. Lewis, so you're going to see a lot of him anytime I'm around, just if I'm in the room. And he's got a really nice quote from Perelandra, which is the second book in his science fiction trilogy, where he says, "Inner silence is for our race a difficult achievement. There is a chattering part of the mind which continues until it is corrected to chatter on even in the holiest of places." For context, he's not actually talking, he's not talking about church here. The character who is saying this has never been to church. But I think we can all kind of agree that in the Mass, our minds like to go everywhere, pretty much, except for what's happening up there. So I think one of the reasons that we tend to find silence troubling is because when everything else around us is quiet, it doesn't mean everything in here is quiet. And this is what I was talking to you about sleep. It's a little hard to see, but there's a lot of the internet dedicated to what your mind does while you're trying to sleep, because this seems to be a very common problem, that when everything is quiet and there's nothing else to do, that's when all the mind stuff seems to happen. We start wondering about things that we did 5 years ago, things that we did yesterday. Our brains are constantly on. We have a lot of this mind chatter going on in the background. Okay, I wanted to do a little experiment, actually. I'm going to time for a minute, and no one is allowed to say anything, okay? Okay, the minute will start. 2, 3, 1. Okay. Now, who found that minute really long? Who was doing something else during that minute? I was doing something else during that minute. Did anyone else see me play with the laptop? I didn't even do that on purpose. None of this is scripted. Okay, some of the talk is scripted. That part wasn't scripted. So think about it. When you have nothing else to do and things are just quiet, where does your mind go? I mean, I'm guessing in here it doesn't tend to go very quiet when everything else is quiet. I think for a lot of us, sometimes we're just kind of planning our day, but sometimes it leaves us open to a lot of negative thoughts as well. It leaves us open to a lot of insecurity or anxiety. We tend to worry about lots of stuff. We tend to be sad about things that we've done. We feel lonely. We feel bored. We feel uncomfortable. That's where the phrase awkward silence comes from. Nobody talks about awkward noise. It's always awkward silence. So I think that's where a lot of our resistance to things being quiet seems to come from, is because when everything is quiet, it leaves us open to all of the uncomfortable things in here that we don't really want to pay attention to. But the talk is not called The Bane of Our Existence, Silence. It's called The Gifts of Silence. So in what way is silence a gift? Oh, good, I changed it on the right one. The quote that's on this slide is from a book called Beginning to Pray by Metropolitan Anthony Bloom. I forget which denomination he is. He's Eastern Orthodox. But it's a great book, and it's all about prayer and stuff, and it's about how to start to pray. And he talks a lot about like dealing with the silence when you're trying to pray. And he says, because we don't yet know how to act without outer reason, we discover that we don't know what to do with ourselves. And then we begin to be increasingly bored. So first of all, you must learn to sit with yourselves, and face boredom, drawing all the possible conclusions. So he's saying here that one of the reasons that we find it so hard to just sit with ourselves with no external stimuli is because we've learned to live in a certain direction. We live from the outside in. We live reacting to what is on the outside, all of the unhelpful voices, all of the things that want our attention from the outside. And we draw them into ourselves, and we turn that into our internal reality. And our internal reality is what we have the most access to, so that becomes our whole reality. This is also another, I haven't read this book in particular, but Henri Nouwen is an amazing author, and if you see any of his books on the shelf, just pick them up, because he's gold, he's beautiful. He has this really lovely thing about voices that fits in very well, where he says, many voices ask for our attention. So voices outside, voices inside. There is a voice that says, prove that you're a good person. Another that says, you should be ashamed of yourself. There's also a voice that says, nobody really cares about you, and another one that says, be sure to become successful, popular, and powerful. But underneath all of those very often noisy voices, sorry, it's not COVID, I got tested, is that still small voice that says, you are my beloved, my favour rests on you. That's the voice that we need most of all to hear. To hear that voice, however, requires a special effort. It requires solitude, silence, and a strong determination to listen. That's what prayer is. It is listening to the voice that calls us, my beloved. So I think that's part of the key here. We are really comfortable with uncomfortable with silence. And I think that's natural to a degree. But the key here is that silence can't just be about nothing. Your goal is not to have an empty brain, but your goal is to be able to listen. And you're not going to be able to listen if you've still got all of that stuff going on in your head. And to demonstrate this further, this is again from Beginning to Pray, he talks about the time that the disciples and Jesus were all on a boat together at once. And there was this big storm, the disciples were really scared. Can somebody tell me what was Jesus doing during this really scary situation where everyone thought they were going to die? Yeah? Say it louder. He was asleep, yes! Jesus was taking a nap. I always thought that was fantastic because, yeah, no, that's exactly what I would be doing in that situation, sure. So he says here, instead of coming to God and saying, you are peace, you are the Lord, say a word and my servant will be healed, say a word and things will come right. They shake him out of his sleep and say, don't you care that we are perishing? In other words, if you can do nothing, at least don't sleep. If you can do nothing better, then at least die in anguish with us. Christ reacts, he gets up and says, men of little faith, and brushing them aside, he turns towards the storm and projecting his inner stillness, his harmony and peace on the storm, he says, be still, be quiet, and everything is quiet again. And you see what Jesus did here? He didn't let the storm that was outside enter into him and turn him into a storm, which is exactly what the disciples were doing. They saw their external circumstances were bad, and that turned everything inside them bad as well. They were scared. They turned on their master, who had done miracles before. They knew that he could save them, like they knew that he had the power to help them. But for some reason, they still didn't trust that he was going to be able to do anything, and they let it turn them on him. What he did instead was he took the peace that he already had inside, and he projected it onto his external world, and that changed everything about how he saw the world, and it changed everything about how his disciples saw the world as well. That's very appropriate for a talk about silence, thank you. Okay, so the key here is that, well, I mean, it's all well and good that Jesus can do this because Jesus is God. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. He's really good at silence. It comes naturally. How are we going to do that? Well, we're not going to be able to do this on our own. We can't just tell all the voices in our head to shut up and they will shut up. The key here is that we do need to bring something that is outside us into our internal world, and that's God, the Prince of Peace, the one who already knows how to do it, right? But the first step, okay, if you read this part from Revelations, it's Revelation 3:20. He says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in with him and dine with him, and he with me." So notice the first step here is that you actually have to be able to hear him. You have to be able to hear the voice of God before you can let him inside. And you can't do that with all of the things that are still chattering around in your head. You especially can't do that with all the things that are chattering around outside your head either. So that's one of the very important aspects of silence that you need. Okay. Somebody told me an interesting story. My brother has a friend who came up with this lovely analogy of, this is almost irrelevant, but of communion being kind of like Jesus being thrown into the sea the same way that Jonah was to calm the storm. So just think about that next time you have communion. But yeah, bringing Christ into anything is a really good way of bringing peace and stillness in. Okay, it took us forever to find a reference for this quote, but I hear it a lot, and I think it works really well here because it's going in the right order. So it says, silence the lips that the heart may speak, silence the heart that the spirit may speak, the spirit being the Spirit of God, not your own spirit. So the first step of all of this is going to be spending some time in external quiet. That's going to have to be the start because we're not cool enough to start from any other place. This is how the process works. So you start with external silence, and that leaves you open to hearing what is inside. It leaves you aware of your internal environment. But eventually you have to quiet that as well because you are not the be-all and end-all of everything. And once you quiet yourself, you'll be able to hear the words of God. And that's basically what prayer is. It's learning to listen to the voice of God in our lives. So because I'm not a very practical person in general, and I love it when people give me practical things to do because I don't know what to do in life. I'm great at theory, but I don't know what to do about the theory. I'm going to give you guys 2 pieces of practical tips or whatever that I found have helped me and just helped people in general. First one is now, and the first one is at the end of the talk. So the first one is, I think everyone's probably heard of this already, mindfulness. It's become a very popular topic in modern society. But for the record, the Desert Fathers have had all of these, pretty much all of these, as part of like ascetic canons for centuries. So these are not new ideas in any case. So these are just some practical tips from Headspace about practicing mindfulness. Mindfulness is basically just becoming aware of your surroundings and calming yourself inside. So the first one is being aware of your breathing. Again, the Desert Fathers have come up with this ages ago, and they actually say to do this with the Jesus prayer. So you take a slow breath. Oh, my Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And you do that a few times, and you do it slowly and meaningfully, and you pay attention to your breath, and it's just a really good way of calming yourself. The second one is spending time in nature. That's my favorite one. Just go for a hike. Just go do something. Leave the city. The city is too noisy. The other one is the next 2 kind of go together, taking breaks throughout the day and avoiding doing too much at once, because it's really easy to become, and I think we all do this at some point, and some people, including me, especially me, do this on purpose, where they make themselves really busy so they don't have to think too much about themselves or something like that. So yeah, just breaking up the day, making sure that you take some time to be present. That can be very helpful. And keeping a journal. This works really well with prayer as well. If you want to make sure that your prayers are grounded and you're like really thinking about what you're saying and stuff, just try writing it down. Those are all tips from Headspace, by the way. Okay, so we've talked about why silence is good for prayer. It's good for your own personal, internal life, but as I mentioned before, not everything is about us. So there is another value to silence. This is another C.S. Lewis quote again, because I have a problem. He says, "We live, in fact, in a world starved for solitude, silence, and private, and therefore starved for meditation and true friendship." Okay, the first one makes sense. We're starved of meditation because silence is an important part of meditation. But what's the connection between silence and friendship? Does anyone have any ideas, out of curiosity, just off the bat? You're allowed to talk in this part. Silence and friendship. Can you see a connection at all? Yeah, I like that. That was the connection I made as well. Even though I'm sure, I don't know if that's what C.S. Lewis was talking about or if that's what a lot of people would be thinking about. But to me, that's the wrong one. That's probably the most important part. And that's what I think I'm going to focus most of the rest of the talk on today. It's the art of listening. There's a big important part of friendship is the art of listening. So this quote says, it's Anthony Koniaris, he's Greek Orthodox, I believe. And he says, how often people come to us, children to parents, wives to husbands, friends to friends, trying to unload their burdens as we sit there listening, our minds and hearts thousands of miles away. If we were completely present to each other, we would rightfully expect miracles to happen. To be completely present to others is to help them experience the personal love of God. So all of this stuff about being mindful and being silent and stuff like that, it's not just self-help advice. This is good for your connections with others. And it's not just good for your connections with others in that it'll make you a easier person to deal with in life, even though it will. It's also good in terms of how you serve other people in showing the love of God to other people. Yeah, that meme really struck me because I know a lot of people who, if you get them to take their headphones off for a conversation, it's just, why? Why would you do this? So yes, this quote as well, if I try to pronounce his name, I'm going to butcher it, so I'm just going to avoid that. But it was a lot longer than this, and I had to cut it down. But he basically starts out by saying that there is a kind of listening that we do to each other where we don't actually want to hear what the other person has to say. We just want to wait for that appropriate pause in the conversation for us to put in our opinion on the matter. And it's not a very healthy practice. So he says, secular education today is aware that often a person can be helped merely by having someone who will listen to him seriously. And upon this insight, it has constructed its own soul therapy, which has attracted great numbers of people, including Christians. But Christians have forgotten that the ministry of listening has been committed to them by him who is himself the great listener and whose work they should share. We should listen with the ears of God that we may speak with the words of God. So listening isn't just something that you do to be nice. It's something that you actually, to be a good Christian, you have to listen to one another. There's no way around it. You can't go through your life and think that you're loving people appropriately if you don't spend the time to listen to them. And you can't listen to someone if you're talking all the time. Yeah, this is just to emphasize that there's a beautiful part in Galatians where it says, bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. The amount of good that can come from just being heard by someone else, being heard seriously by someone else, is like, you can't imagine how much some people just need somebody to talk to, and how much that can change somebody's life. It can be the difference between life and death for a lot of people. But it's something that we often don't really think of as being a service. Like, it's something that we don't think of as being like a serious part of the Christian life, of ministering to others. When you think of ministry, you think, what am I going to say to all these people? How am I going to tell these people that God loves them? What are the words I'm going to use to convey this message to them? When really, one of the best things that you can do to convey the love of God is just to be silent and attentive, to just make sure that the other person genuinely feels like they're being heard and like they matter. Not everyone can be a good speaker. That's just a calling for some people. But everyone can be a good listener, and it's a calling that everyone has, I think, as a Christian. Okay, so I think I'm gonna go, this is just the last piece of practical advice that I'm gonna leave you guys with. This is another thing that's become very popular in modern culture, and I'm hoping you've all heard of it before. Active listening. But again, this is just something that is part of the normal Christian life. This is not a new thing that, modern secular society has come up with. And active listening is basically just a way of listening to people in such a manner that lets them realize that you understand what they are saying, that you hear the words that they're saying and you understand them, and that the conversation matters to you. And it takes just 3 simple things to accomplish this. So first, you have to have an attitude of respect. People can tell when you don't respect them when they're talking to you. Like, if you're wandering off, if your brain is wandering off, if you're mentally checking out, they can tell, and they can, all this says to someone is, you don't actually care about what I'm saying, and this translates to, you don't actually care about me. So yeah, being genuinely respectful of what the other person is saying, even if you disagree with them, that's a really important part. The next part is also it's so intuitive, but it's really hard sometimes because I think because we have that sort of internal chatter in our heads a lot. It's really hard to give someone genuine attention. It's really hard to be able to show someone, my entire attention is on you. I'm focused on what you have to say because what you have to say matters to me. So it's really, honestly, active listening is about coming out of yourself and making your actions about the other person. So it's all about moving out of yourself. And this is shown very good in the last point here, which is probably the one that I have the most trouble with personally, which is adjusting to let the other person guide the conversation. Because whenever we're talking to someone, we're so eager to put in our 2 cents worth. We're so eager to talk about what really interests us. But sometimes that's not what the other person needs. Sometimes they're trying to get to something else that will help them. They want to unload something else on you. So it's really important to be able to sort of let the other person take the lead in the conversation so that, because remember, listening is not about you. It's not about what can help you. Even though listening does help you, it does help you grow as a person. But it's not about that. It's about showing the other person that they're loved and that they matter. Yeah, that was all. That was a very short talk. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you. I don't know what to do here.
Hey guys, as you can tell, tonight we'll be continuing the MasterChef series, which is spanning the 50 days.